Months after the trial that made headlines, Marcus Johnson stood in a bustling community center, surrounded by teenagers scribbling notes and asking questions. The room buzzed with energy as he led a workshop on constitutional rights, his passion for justice lighting up the faces of those listening. These were kids who had been written off by society, kids like him, underestimated because of their age, race, or background. But Marcus saw something different in them: potential. His nonprofit, Equal Ground, had grown rapidly, thanks to donations and volunteers eager to support its mission. It wasn't just about teaching legal knowledge. It was about empowering young people to challenge the systems stacked against them. The law isn't perfect, Marcus told the group, pacing slowly across the front of the room. But it's a tool. And if you know how to use it, you can make real change, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. As he spoke, Judge Evelyn Harper walked into the back of the room unnoticed. She hesitated at the door, watching silently as Marcus commanded the attention of the teens. His confidence was magnetic, his words inspiring. For a moment, she felt out of place, unsure if she should even be there. But then Marcus spotted her and smiled faintly, gesturing for her to come closer. After the session ended, Marcus approached her. "Your Honor," he said politely, extending a hand. "I didn't expect to see you here." Judge Harper shook his hand, her expression softening. "I wanted to thank you again, for everything," she admitted. "What you did, it changed me. I've spent my career thinking I knew what justice looked like, but you showed me there's so much more to it than rules and procedures." Her voice wavered slightly, betraying the weight of her emotions. Marcus nodded, understanding the courage it took for her to say those words. "Change starts with honesty, Your Honor," he replied. "You didn't have to come here today, but the fact that you did, that says something. Accountability isn't easy, but it's necessary." Her visit marked a turning point not just for her, but for others too. Word spread quickly about Judge Harper's involvement with Equal Ground. She began attending training sessions alongside court staff, learning how to recognize and address biases in her courtroom. Slowly but surely, she became an advocate for reform within the judiciary, using her position to push for policies aimed at reducing disparities in sentencing and increasing access to legal resources for underserved communities. For Marcus, seeing Judge Harper evolve gave him hope. It proved that growth was possible, even for those in positions of power. He often reflected on their journey together, realizing that while they started as adversaries, they had become unlikely allies in the fight for fairness. Their story inspired countless others, showing that redemption could take many forms, and that accountability wasn't just about punishment, it was about progress. As years passed, Marcus continued expanding Equal Ground, opening chapters in cities across the country. His work earned him recognition as one of the most influential voices in criminal justice reform. Yet despite his success, he remained humble, always crediting the young people he worked with as the true drivers of change. "They're the ones who remind me why I do this," he'd often say. "This isn't my fight alone. It belongs to all of us." One day, standing outside the same courthouse where it all began, Marcus paused to look up at its towering pillars. Inside those walls, he had faced mockery, doubt, and prejudice, but he had also found strength, purpose, and unexpected allies. The building hadn't changed, but the world around it had. Conversations about bias and fairness were no longer whispers. They were loud, unignorable demands for action. And Marcus, he was just getting started. News of Marcus Johnson's courtroom triumph spread like wildfire. By the next morning, headlines blared his name across newspapers, social media platforms, and television networks. Teen prodigy turns tables on judge in shocking courtroom drama. Read one headline, while another declared, "Harvard lawyer disguised as teen exposes bias in justice system." The story captured the nation's attention, sparking debates about fairness, privilege, and systemic inequality. People couldn't get enough of the young man who had outwitted a seasoned judge and exposed flaws in the legal system, all while staying composed under pressure. Marcus became an overnight sensation, Talk shows clamored to book him for interviews. Law firms offered lucrative positions, and universities invited him to speak at conferences. But Marcus wasn't interested in fame or fortune. Instead, he used his newfound platform to amplify the voices of those who often went unheard. He appeared on national television, not to boast about his victory, but to discuss the very issues he'd raised in court: racial profiling, implicit bias, and the need for reform within the justice system. His eloquence and passion resonated with millions, earning him praise from activists, educators, and even some lawmakers. Meanwhile, Judge Evelyn Harper faced intense scrutiny. Clips of her mocking Marcus during the trial circulated online, drawing widespread criticism. Petitions calling for her removal from the bench gained thousands of signatures, and calls poured into the Judicial Oversight Committee demanding accountability. Some argued that her behavior was emblematic of larger problems within the judiciary, while others believed she deserved a chance to learn from her mistakes. In response, the court issued a statement announcing that Judge Harper would undergo mandatory sensitivity training and be placed under review for the foreseeable future. Despite the backlash, Judge Harper made a surprising move weeks later. She released a public apology, acknowledging her errors and expressing gratitude for the lessons Marcus had taught her. "I failed to uphold the standards of fairness and impartiality that we must all strive for," she admitted during a press conference. "Attorney Johnson reminded me, and everyone watching, that justice requires more than just following laws. It demands empathy, humility, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths." Her apology divided opinions. Some saw it as a genuine step toward redemption, while others dismissed it as too little, too late. Regardless, it added another layer to the ongoing conversation about accountability and growth. For Marcus, however, the focus remained on the bigger picture. He announced the launch of a nonprofit organization aimed at helping marginalized youth navigate the legal system and providing resources for communities affected by systemic biases. He named it *Equal Ground*, symbolizing his belief that everyone deserves a fair chance. As months passed, Marcus returned to the same courthouse, not as a defendant, but as a mentor. He began working with teenagers facing minor charges, teaching them about their rights and guiding them through the complexities of the law. Many of these young people reminded him of himself, bright minds underestimated because of their appearance or circumstances. Through workshops and one-on-one sessions, Marcus inspired them to believe in their potential and fight for justice, not just for themselves, but for others. The courtroom where it all began became a symbol of transformation. Where once there was mockery and dismissal, there was now hope and possibility. Even Judge Harper crossed paths with Marcus again during one of his visits to the courthouse. This time, their interaction was respectful and reflective. She thanked him for challenging her perspective, and though their relationship remained professional, it carried a quiet mutual understanding. The journey hadn't been easy for either of them, but both had emerged changed, for better or worse. Little did they know, their story was far from over. It had sparked something greater, igniting conversations and inspiring actions that reached far beyond the walls of the courtroom. And for Marcus, this was only the beginning of what he hoped would become a lifetime dedicated to creating a fairer, more equitable world. The courtroom was eerily quiet as Judge Harper prepared to deliver her ruling. Every eye in the room was fixed on her, waiting to see how she would respond after Marcus's powerful defense and unflinching exposure of systemic bias. She adjusted her glasses, her hands trembling slightly as she shuffled through the documents in front of her. For a woman known for her sharp tongue and unshakable confidence, this moment felt different, almost vulnerable. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, she began, her voice quieter than usual. "I find no credible basis to support the charges against Mr. Johnson. The case is dismissed." Her words hung in the air, met with a mix of surprise and relief from the gallery. Some people clapped softly before quickly silencing themselves, aware of the gravity of the situation. Marcus exhaled deeply, his shoulders relaxing for the first time since the trial began. But he wasn't done yet. As the prosecutor gathered their papers and prepared to leave, Marcus stood up again, turning to face Judge Harper directly. His expression wasn't one of triumph or anger. It was calm, almost compassionate. "Your Honor," he said, his tone measured but firm, "I want to thank you for taking the time to hear me out today. I know this hasn't been easy for any of us." Judge Harper looked at him, her lips pressed into a thin line. She seemed unsure whether to feel defensive or grateful. Before she could respond, Marcus continued, "What happened here today wasn't personal. It was about accountability, not just for you, but for all of us. Bias isn't something we're born with. It's something we learn. And if we can recognize it, we can change it." His words struck a nerve. The judge shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her gaze dropping to the bench in front of her. For someone accustomed to being in control, admitting fault didn't come easily. But Marcus wasn't asking for an apology. He was offering a path forward. "You have a choice now," he added gently. "You can let this moment define you, or you can use it to grow. Either way, I hope you'll remember that fairness isn't just a word. It's a promise we make to each other." For a long moment, there was silence. Then, Judge Harper spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Attorney Johnson." "Marcus." She corrected herself. "You've given me a lot to think about. I won't deny that I made mistakes today. Mistakes I deeply regret. I hope you'll allow me the opportunity to do better moving forward." Her admission sent ripples through the courtroom. Even the bailiff raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by the rare display of humility. As the proceedings wrapped up, whispers erupted among the crowd. Some praised Marcus for his composure and wisdom, while others debated what consequences Judge Harper might face for her behavior. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around, eager to capture reactions from those involved. Word spread quickly about the extraordinary turn of events, sparking discussions not only about the case itself, but also about the larger issues Marcus had highlighted. Inside, Marcus packed up his belongings, his mind already shifting to what came next. He knew this victory was just the beginning, a stepping stone toward creating real change. As he walked out of the courtroom, the weight of his accomplishments settled over him. He had proven his innocence, exposed deep-rooted biases, and forced one of the most powerful figures in the room to confront uncomfortable truths. Yet, despite the whirlwind of attention surrounding him, Marcus remained grounded. This wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about justice, redemption or retribution. That question lingered in the air, unanswered for now. But one thing was certain. Marcus Johnson had left an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed his journey, including Judge Harper. Whether she chose to embrace this moment as a chance for growth remained to be seen. But the seed had been planted. As the courtroom absorbed the magnitude of Marcus's defense, he took a moment to pause. The prosecution had been thoroughly dismantled, their case reduced to mere speculation and flawed evidence. But Marcus wasn't done yet. He knew this was more than just about clearing his name. It was an opportunity to shine a light on something far bigger: the systemic biases that plagued the justice system. Turning toward Judge Harper, Marcus spoke with a calm authority that commanded everyone's attention. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady but filled with conviction, "this case isn't just about me. It's about the countless others who walk into courtrooms like this one every day. People who are judged not by the facts, but by how they look, what they wear, or where they come from." The gallery fell silent as Marcus continued, weaving together stories of injustice he'd studied during his undercover research. He described cases where young black individuals were unfairly targeted, arrested without sufficient evidence, and pressured into plea deals simply because they couldn't afford proper legal representation. Each example hit home, painting a vivid picture of a system stacked against those already marginalized. "One of the most dangerous things we can do is assume guilt based on stereotypes," Marcus said, his eyes scanning the room. "When someone sees a teenager in a hoodie, they shouldn't automatically think criminal. When someone hears my accent, or sees the color of my skin, it shouldn't lead them to conclusions before I've even spoken. Yet that's exactly what happens, not just here, but across the country. His words struck a chord with many in the audience. Some nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, perhaps recognizing their own biases. Even the court staff, who had initially chuckled at Judge Harper's earlier mockery, now sat quietly, listening intently. Judge Harper, however, looked increasingly uneasy. She gripped her gavel tightly, her knuckles turning white as Marcus addressed her directly. "Your Honor, you made assumptions about me the moment I walked in here. You dismissed me because of how I looked, not because of what I could offer. That's not just unfair, it's harmful. And if we don't acknowledge these issues, they'll keep happening over and over again." For a long moment, the judge didn't respond. Her usual stern demeanor cracked slightly, revealing a flicker of vulnerability beneath. She glanced around the room, noticing the sea of faces watching her, some sympathetic, others critical. The weight of Marcus's words settled heavily on her shoulders. Finally, she cleared her throat and spoke. "Attorney Johnson," she said haltingly, her tone softer than before, "I appreciate your perspective. This has certainly been an eye-opening experience for me." Though her apology felt incomplete, it was a start, a small crack in the armor of denial that often shielded those in positions of power. Marcus acknowledged her words with a slight nod, but didn't let up entirely. "Thank you for listening, Your Honor," he replied. "But listening isn't enough. We all have a responsibility to challenge our assumptions and work toward fairness, not just for people like me, but for everyone who deserves equal treatment under the law." By the time Marcus finished speaking, the atmosphere in the courtroom had transformed. What had begun as a simple vandalism case had evolved into a powerful conversation about justice, equality, and accountability. As Marcus returned to his seat, the crowd erupted into murmurs once again, this time filled with admiration rather than skepticism. The message was clear. Marcus hadn't just defended himself. He'd ignited a spark that would leave a lasting impression on everyone present, including Judge Harper. With the truth now out in the open, Marcus wasted no time taking control of the courtroom. Judge Harper, still reeling from the revelation, reluctantly granted him permission to represent himself. "Proceed, Mr. Attorney Johnson," she said, her voice tinged with both embarrassment and resignation. The crowd leaned forward in their seats, eager to see what this young prodigy would do next. Marcus stepped confidently to the center of the room, his earlier nervousness completely gone. He began by addressing the prosecution's case point by point, dismantling it with surgical precision. First, he highlighted the shaky timeline provided by the alleged eyewitness, a store owner who claimed to have seen Marcus near the scene of the vandalism late at night. Marcus pointed out that the witness had initially described the suspect as wearing a red jacket, while Marcus was wearing a black hoodie when he was arrested. This discrepancy alone raises serious doubts about the reliability of the identification, Marcus stated firmly, his voice clear and commanding. Next, he turned his attention to the grainy security footage submitted as evidence. The video showed a shadowy figure spray painting the side of the building, but the face was completely obscured. Marcus argued that the figure could have been anyone. "Your Honor, the prosecution is asking you to convict me based on speculation, not facts. There's no concrete proof linking me to this crime." The prosecutor, visibly flustered by Marcus's sharp arguments, tried to interrupt. "Objection, Your Honor. This is irrelevant." But Marcus didn't miss a beat. He countered smoothly. "If my innocence is irrelevant, then why are we even here? Isn't the burden of proof supposed to rest on the prosecution?" Judge Harper hesitated for a moment before siding with Marcus. "Overruled," she muttered, avoiding eye contact with him. Her earlier confidence was crumbling under the weight of Marcus's relentless logic. As the trial progressed, Marcus continued to expose holes in the prosecution's case. He cited legal precedents, quoting statutes and past rulings with ease. At one point, he even referenced a landmark Supreme Court decision, that directly contradicted the prosecution's argument. The gallery murmured in amazement. Some whispered about how they'd never seen such a polished performance, let alone from someone so young. Judge Harper, meanwhile, struggled to maintain her composure. Every time she attempted to assert her authority, Marcus calmly deflected her interruptions with well-reasoned responses. It became increasingly clear that she had underestimated him. And now she was paying the price. Her face flushed red as she realized the entire courtroom was watching her squirm. By the time Marcus wrapped up his defense, the mood in the room had shifted dramatically. What had started as a routine hearing had transformed into a masterclass in legal strategy. Even the bailiff couldn't hide his admiration, nodding approvingly as Marcus delivered his closing remarks. "Your Honor, members of the court, I stand before you today, not just as a defendant, but as a reminder of something far greater, the importance of fairness and justice. If we allow assumptions and biases to dictate outcomes, then we fail not only individuals like me, but the very system we're sworn to uphold." The room fell silent as Marcus returned to his seat, his words hanging in the air. For the first time since the trial began, Judge Harper looked genuinely unsure of herself. She glanced around the courtroom, sensing the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The tables had turned, and there was no denying it. Marcus Johnson wasn't just proving his innocence. He was proving that brilliance knows no age, no appearance, and no boundaries. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Marcus stood silently for a moment, his calm demeanor masking the storm brewing inside him. Judge Harper's mocking tone still hung heavy in the air, but instead of responding with anger or frustration, Marcus reached into the pocket of his hoodie. He pulled out a folded document, its edges slightly worn from being carried around. For a brief second, he held it in his hand, letting the anticipation build before handing it to the bailiff. "What's this?" Judge Harper asked, her voice laced with impatience. She glanced at the bailiff as he approached her bench, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. The courtroom fell eerily silent as everyone waited to see what Marcus had produced. When the document finally landed in front of her, Judge Harper unfolded it and began reading. At first, her expression remained unchanged, still stern, still skeptical. But then something shifted. Her eyebrows shot up, and her mouth opened slightly as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The document was undeniable proof. Marcus wasn't just any teenager. He was a licensed attorney. Not only that, but he had graduated at the top of his class from Harvard Law School at the age of 19. Gasps rippled through the gallery as people craned their necks to get a better look at the young man standing before them. Some whispered in disbelief, while others stared in awe. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a moment, too stunned to keep up. Judge Harper blinked rapidly, her face flushing red as the weight of her earlier comments hit her like a freight train. You're an asterisk attorney asterisk," she stammered, her voice quieter than usual. It was rare to see the normally unshakable judge caught so off guard. Marcus nodded, his posture relaxed but confident. "Yes, Your Honor," he replied evenly. "I've been conducting undercover research into systemic biases within the justice system. Unfortunately, my arrest gave me first-hand experience of exactly what I've been studying." His words were measured, each one landing with precision. "I never intended to reveal my identity today, but given the circumstances, I felt it necessary to clarify a few things." The room erupted into murmurs again, louder this time. People exchanged wide-eyed glances, some shaking their heads in disbelief. How could someone so young, and dressed so casually, be a Harvard-educated lawyer? It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was right there, in black and white. Judge Harper sat frozen for a moment, her earlier mockery now haunting her every thought. She cleared her throat awkwardly, trying to regain control of the situation. "Well, Mr. Attorney Johnson," she corrected herself, stumbling over her words. "This certainly changes things." Marcus didn't gloat or revel in the judge's discomfort. Instead, he maintained his composure, speaking calmly but firmly. "Your Honor, I'm not here to embarrass anyone. My goal is to ensure that justice is served, not just for me, but for everyone who faces unfair treatment because of bias or assumptions. If we can learn from this moment, then perhaps something positive can come out of it." His words struck a chord with many in the room. Some nodded in agreement, while others looked at Judge Harper, waiting to see how she would respond. For her part, the judge looked visibly rattled, gripping the edge of her bench as though trying to steady herself. The tables had turned completely, and there was no denying it. Marcus Johnson was about to take charge of the courtroom, and no one saw it coming. As the trial continued, Judge Harper's patience seemed to wear thinner with every passing minute. Marcus, still standing alone in front of the courtroom, tried his best to defend himself. When given the chance to speak, he began carefully explaining why the accusations against him didn't add up. He pointed out inconsistencies in the timeline provided by the prosecution and questioned how anyone could have identified him as the culprit based solely on a grainy security camera image. But instead of listening intently, Judge Harper cut him off mid-sentence. "Hold it right there," she said sharply, leaning forward in her chair. Her voice carried a note of disbelief mixed with irritation. "Are you telling me that you a teenager who looks like he just rolled out of bed, are challenging the evidence presented by trained professionals? Do you really think you know better than they do?" The gallery erupted into quiet murmurs again, some people smirking at the judge's remark. Marcus felt his cheeks grow warm, but he refused to let her comments rattle him. Instead, he took a deep breath and calmly responded, "Your Honor, I'm not claiming to be smarter than anyone. I'm just asking for fairness. The facts don't support their case." This only seemed to amuse Judge Harper further. She crossed her arms and tilted her head slightly, studying him like one might examine an oddity at a circus. "Fairness," she echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Son, if you wanted fairness, maybe you should have thought twice before picking up that spray can. Or are you going to tell me next that you're some kind of legal expert too?" Her mocking tone drew a few chuckles from the courtroom staff, but Marcus remained unfazed. If anything, her dismissiveness fueled his determination even more. Without missing a beat, he replied, "Actually, Your Honor, I believe everyone deserves a fair shot, regardless of age or background. And if we're talking about expertise," he paused for a moment, letting the suspense hang in the air before continuing, "I'd argue that understanding the law is less about titles and more about knowing how to apply it correctly." At this point, Judge Harper looked genuinely annoyed. Clearly, she hadn't expected such a composed response from someone so young. "Oh, please," she scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "You expect us to believe you've been brushing up on constitutional law between classes, or whatever it is kids your age do these days. Spare me the theatrics." Marcus clenched his fists briefly beneath the table, but kept his composure. He knew exactly what she was doing, using her authority to make him feel small, hoping he'd crumble under pressure. But Marcus wasn't just any teenager. Beneath his calm exterior lay years of hard work, dedication, and achievements that would leave anyone speechless, if only they knew the truth. For now, though, he decided to play along. Letting the judge underestimate him worked perfectly in his favor. Every sarcastic comment she made only strengthened his resolve to prove her wrong. As the back and forth continued, Marcus noticed something interesting, a flicker of doubt creeping into her expression. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it was there. Maybe she was starting to realize that this case wasn't as open and shut as she'd assumed. Meanwhile, the crowd watched the exchange with growing fascination. Some were entertained by the judge's sharp tongue, while others found themselves rooting quietly for Marcus. They couldn't put their finger on it, but there was something different about him. Something that hinted at a much bigger story waiting to unfold. Little did they know, the real shock was yet to come. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as a young black teenager named Marcus Johnson stood nervously in front of Judge Evelyn Harper. The room was filled with people, some curious onlookers, others waiting for their own cases to be heard. But all eyes were now fixed on Marcus. He looked out of place, dressed in a simple hoodie and sneakers, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. Across the room, Judge Harper sat high above everyone else, her expression stern and unyielding. She had a reputation for being no-nonsense, often cutting people off mid-sentence if she felt they weren't taking things seriously enough. Marcus shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. His heart raced as he listened to the charges against him. Vandalism. Someone claimed he had tagged a local business with graffiti late at night, but Marcus knew he wasn't guilty. He hadn't even been near that building when the incident occurred. Still, here he was, standing alone in court without a lawyer by his side. When asked why he didn't have legal representation, Marcus simply said, "I couldn't afford one." Judge Harper raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Couldn't afford one," she repeated, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Or maybe you thought this was some kind of game. Do you understand what's happening here, young man? This is a serious matter." Her voice echoed through the room, silencing the few remaining whispers from the crowd. Marcus nodded quickly, trying to stay calm. "Yes, Your Honor," he replied politely. "But I swear, I didn't do what they're saying I did." The judge leaned back in her chair, studying him carefully. To her, Marcus looked like just another troubled teenager who probably spent more time skipping school than thinking about laws or consequences. She sighed loudly, shaking her head. "You know, son," she began, her tone almost mocking, "most people bring lawyers to court, not hoodies and excuses. Are you sure you're ready to handle this on your own?" A few people in the gallery chuckled softly at her comment, though Marcus didn't find it funny. He clenched his jaw but forced himself to remain respectful. "I'll do my best, Your Honor," he said firmly, meeting her eyes despite the knot forming in his stomach. What Judge Harper didn't realize, and what no one else in the room could see, was that Marcus wasn't your average teenager. Beneath his casual appearance lay a brilliant mind, one that had already achieved things most adults only dreamed of. But for now, he kept that part of himself hidden, choosing instead to let the judge underestimate him. And as he stood there, quietly absorbing her dismissive remarks, he couldn't help but notice how quick she was to judge him based on how he looked rather than what he might actually be capable of. The tension in the room grew thicker with each passing moment. Marcus knew he had two choices: let the judge's attitude discourage him, or use it as fuel to prove her wrong. As Judge Harper continued peppering him with sarcastic questions, Marcus made up his mind. This wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. It was about showing her, and everyone else watching, that appearances can be deceiving. Little did they know, the real story was only beginning to unfold.